Hey guys, and welcome to Dark Arts. This is where we talk about all things relationship-wise, helping you guys navigate the dangers of that world, so you don't get influenced, overpowered, so you don't get manipulated into situations you shouldn't be in. But today we're going to be giving you guys something a bit special, like we have been for the last few weeks, talking about self-awareness and also talking about how to navigate relationships in a very unique way. And so I'm joined here by my fabulous co-host. You've seen her once, twice, 3 times a lady, and that is Naomi. How you doing today, Naomi?
I'm fantastic. Hi guys, how we doing? How you doing?
You're doing good, and I'm doing good, B. It's good to see you.
Likewise, it's been a minute. You've been
Yeah,
hiding.
it's been a minute still.
You've been hiding.
Well, do you know what? You know what? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that because let's start strong then. Let's start strong. When you say I've been hiding from you, what do you mean by that? Tell us what you mean.
I mean that we kind of created somewhat of we came to an agreement that we'd be working together on a consistent basis, on a weekly basis. And I tried to reach out to you, and the communication was just a bit airy, inconsistent, flat. And I was like, oh, I'm trying to like not make it personal because I understand the lifestyle, or obviously we kind of do similar things. I know you can get busy and like it's hard to sometimes communicate clearly with people. But then I was starting to feel like, oh, it's getting a bit personal now. They always people make time for the things that they want to. So when certain things aren't being done, it's like, okay, how long is this going to go on before it starts feeling like an intentional act of negligence kind of thing? So that's what.
I want you to go deeper though, like real. Let's keep it real because it's an honest podcast. So and we had our real conversation already. So
Okay,
they get a taste of what we talk about, but keep it a buck, keep it 100. How are you really feeling at the moment? Because it was about a week or two. It was about a week or 2 or 3. So
So I was basically thinking of my dickhead, like, why are you not
it's true.
and it's so crazy because then I started. It's weird that I started thinking, is it me? Have I done something? Did I do something? Or is you annoyed with me? And I don't know where that came from. But it's like I'm reaching out to you, you're not replying, and I'm trying my best to be as polite and nice as possible because I don't feel like the situation warrants like any type of like quote unquote disrespect or like toxic energy. But then at the same time, it's like you being so rude. Like, why are we hiding?
Yeah, listen, and by the way, we're talking about this because I think it's a real topic. Because I think it's great to talk about because we had our discussion already. But I'll give you my perspective as well from my side. So what was happening is, I was meant to have produced some videos, edited some videos, right? That we had shot because there's a couple of videos that are going to be coming out before this one comes out, right? Which have been started to be released already now. But at the time, I promised that I was going to do this by the 1st of October before I leave to go to America. These videos will be coming out every week systematically. Da, 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 da. I then got distracted with other pieces of work that I was doing, didn't make that a main priority, did other things instead, and I realized I don't have no time to now put this into editing these videos. So now I'm feeling bad because I'm like, yo, I haven't done what I promised Naomi. And then when I'm like, I don't want to disappoint her. This is the main part of where I was avoiding because I was like, I don't want to disappoint her. So I'm gonna avoid her because I haven't done the work yet. I'd rather just do the work and then say, hey, the work is done, rather than say, yeah, do you know what? Let me try and do it next week, and I might not be able to do it next week. So in my head, I'm like, okay, just avoid Naomi as long as you can, so that you avoid the disappointment. It was not you. It was I was scared for you to feel disappointment in me, which is something I have to work on because that's a part of the trauma response, I guess, of people pleasing as well aspect. But yeah, that's what I was avoiding. So whilst you're feeling what you're feeling, I don't know you're feeling that. I'm just like, I'm selfishly thinking, I don't want to be disappointing Naomi. I promised her, you know what I'm saying? Like, I do respect you. I do got love for you. And I don't want to disappoint Naomi. And that's why I was like, just dodge her as long as you can. You know what I mean? If that means don't come on Instagram today, at points, I'm telling you this, at points, I'm like, don't come on Instagram. Do not post. Do not check the messages. Just stay offline. at points. So yeah, that's what was on mind.
Shake my head. And it was interesting for me to hear you tell me that. And I was like, well, why did you feel like that would make any sense to avoid? Surely that would just make things worse.
It would. It would. I think because in my head I'm thinking to myself, do it tomorrow. And then something else will come up. I'll do it next day. Something else will come up. And I'll be like, by the time I realize I'm in America, I'm doing this and that and this and that, you ain't got no time to do this. And I was like, bro. And I'm like, I don't want to disappoint this person by telling them I ain't done it yet. So just wait till you do it. And then be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, and by the way, I've got the thing that you wanted. Yeah, I've done it. Da, da, da. That's how it worked in my head. But I know that's not how it's going to look on the outside. But in my head, that's what it comes out as. You know what I mean?
Do you feel like that's a consistent theme or, I guess, attitude that a lot of men have when it comes to dealing and get that with women and meeting expectations? Because I feel like it's not a new excuse. Can I call it an excuse? Yeah, can I call it an excuse? It's not a new excuse that I've heard. I was avoiding you because I didn't want to make it worse, but ultimately the action of avoidance definitely heightens. It just stretches out the whatever's going on. And I'm wondering.
Do you know what? I never really thought about it until you said it. And now I'm thinking to myself, actually, there probably is a lot of guys, thought process as to why they avoid certain situations. They are thinking they don't want to disappoint the person. And then naturally it's like, let me avoid you or avoid the situation or avoid the topic at hand until I've got some answers. Because until I've got some answers, what can I provide you in that moment? Do you know what I mean? It's a sticky situation in that moment. So maybe I never thought about it, but I can see how that would play into a lot of men's mind.
You said until I have the answers, and I found that interesting because you don't even know the question. And you know what's so interesting? When you were quote unquote avoiding me, I wasn't messaging or reaching out to you to ask you about the deadlines we set. I was actually reaching out to find out whether we were still adhering to our routine of filming every Thursday, so I could, because I've started my masters now, so I wanted to know like what my weeks would look like. So me not getting any response from you was kind of like you were avoiding something I was never even asking. And I think
and that's it. Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
I hear often, this is obviously more in relation to relationships. If a man quote unquote knows that he's going to receive relative criticism or backlash, he'll try and avoid the situation for as long as possible. But I don't know if I can make this general statement, but women don't forget anything, so you're never going to not have to account for what you did, if that makes sense. So you avoiding it just makes situations worse more often than not. But then earlier you spoke about that you appreciated how I handled you, and I just wanted to kind of pick at that a little bit because I don't know if I intentionally did anything to, create that safety parameter for the situation.
You know what it is? I think if I take into account, I think I have to take into my account my own thought process and makeup. But what you're saying is absolutely correct, right? So, like for us as men, we like to have the answers. You know what I mean? And even though we may not know the question, we know there's something that we haven't done quite right. You know what I mean? So even though we may not know the answer of what your question going to be, we know eventually that question going to come up. So that question going to come up. I need some answers. You know what I mean? I'm going to need some answer time. I don't want to be standing in front of you and I'll be like, I don't really know again, because they don't be looking cute. They don't be looking good. You know what I mean? Because we might have experienced in the past, okay, you don't know, so when? And it's like, I don't know when. So I don't want to give you the answer. It's like, I don't want to give you the answer. I just want it to be done and given to you so you don't have to stress about the situation. But you're absolutely right. In doing so, and then failure to communicate, and then failure to talk about it, it leaves you on an island of unknowing. And I don't see it at the point in time in that way. In my head, I see it as, you ain't got the answers. Don't interact, because it's gonna come to that conversation, and you ain't gonna have to give her the answers, and then you'll be back here at square one anyway. Then you'll be feeling bad, and you ain't got the answers. What's the point? So then in your head, that's how it sounds like. You know what I mean? What's the point of putting myself in a place where I don't have the answers and I'm feeling bad as well because I know I ain't done what I'm supposed to do. Because I know the fact is, you know what you're supposed to have done. That's the
Right.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then going on to what you were saying
Yeah.
about what you did. So when we had our conversation, I'm ready at that point. I'm ready, and I prepared myself that, you know what, if I get shot down, it's only fair because I've kind of taken a piss here. So at this point, I know that if I get shot down, if you come at me, if you say, listen, coach, what's going on, and you're stressed and angry at that moment, you had every right. In my head, I'm now ready to confront it. I've braced myself. I've got myself ready. I'm like, you have to take this now. You can't keep avoiding the situation and avoiding her. It's time to deal with the situation. So when obviously then we have our call and our talk, I'm ready to be finished. And I think if I speak to where that comes from, it's because of what I've got from parenting. You do something wrong, you're expecting a beat or a shout down. And it's making me think about how I'm going to handle my kids in the future, but that's literally it. And I think it's because obviously, you know, you didn't ever get time to really express your sentiments. So I don't mind. I think the beating was fine. It's just that I never got to express why this situation happened. So if let's say there was actually a genuine fault that happened, I couldn't give an excuse like that. It didn't matter what the problem was. It was irrelevant. You still gonna get beat. You still gonna get disciplined. You still gonna get shouted at, irrespective of whatever the situation was happening at the time. So in my head, I think what's qualified as that situation is that I'm thinking to myself, well, if Naomi comes at me, I gotta take it at this moment because I know I've messed up. But then when obviously we have the call, you give me grace in that moment, and that changes. I'll tell you that moment is the equivalent of what Christ does for us and what I've experienced in my relationship with God. Don't do that. Don't do that.
You are so dramatic.
I'm being deadly serious. Listen, I'm being deadly serious. Listen to me now. This is real. Because what we expect when we do something wrong, because of based on how I've grown up, is to be shouted at, is to be told, hey, da 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 da, or to be beaten. I'm expecting punishment. And to be fair, like I said, I was ready for it because I know I messed up. But when I'm dealing with God, that's not how I get treated. Like if I've messed up, my conversation with God is not you're bad, son, you're this, you're that. It's come, let's go again. I'm embracing you, I'm loving you, and it's hard sometimes to accept that because you're not used to that. And I'm saying that in that moment when we had our conversation, that's exactly what I got. You know, I got that. No, don't worry. Listen, I understand, and that means now I'm like, okay, no, I need to do whatever I need to do to help Naomi to get this thing out now every week, irrespective of whatever I feel like. You know what I mean? Now I feel like I'm in debt to you because that's what Scripture says. You know what I mean? But we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah,
That's adorable. That's like a formula, and it's validating. It's something that I've tried to learn over the years, being graceful, giving people space. But I think the outcome sometimes is what helped me a lot in that situation. I knew that the relationship that I had with you, I valued. So I made sure I stayed on top of my impulses. Basically, it's like how you feel is valid, Naomi. But before you actually respond or react, just make sure you have the full scope. And I wouldn't have been able to have that if I didn't give you space to speak. So I try to be graceful, but sometimes my emotions do get the best of me. And I think, I don't know, giving people grace sometimes feels a bit easier when you're not in romantic relationships or like there's no like sort of like, emotional attachment to the situation. At the end of the day, I knew that I hadn't done anything to you to be ignored. So I knew whatever it is, that eventually you'd find time to reach out to me. But I do feel like when it comes to like my relationships with family or even like my romantic relationships, sometimes it's a bit harder to keep those emotions beneath the surface. Probably still giving you the grace, but in my voice you can hear that I'm upset, and that might not have the same. I might not get the same results I've probably got with you in a quote unquote romantic relationship because you know humans like to address the attitude and not the message. Yeah.
no, do you know what? I think you're absolutely right. And the more you talk about it, the more my eyes are like, oh my days, like, do you know how bad that is? Like, because if you're in a relationship, it's more intense because you're right next to the person, like in terms of like emotionally. So if I was to take myself out of it, like objectively, and look at the situation, if this was a relationship, I can see how easy someone says you're doing this on purpose. Because now at this point, we're in a relationship, it's slightly different. We don't have the space. We don't have that gap. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're living your life, I'm living my life. But if in a relationship, our lives are intertwined. So at this point in time, it's been 2-3 weeks, and you avoiding the situation and avoiding the topic. This is frustrating. Like, you are intentionally trying to hurt me at this point, and I can see how that can easily be the thought process, because you're much closer than you are when you're, let's say, friends, where you have your own independent lives. So I can see how that can be very frustrating, to a point where anger is built up to a point where you're like, F you, F this, because it's 2-3 weeks, you know?
Yeah.
What's the for? What's going through your mind, Naomi? Tell us truthfully.
The truth is, right, and I don't want to
Yes.
make this thing, right? I think it's very. I don't think that women should practice grace more than men. However, I feel like it serves women slightly more to be able to practice and strengthen that skill, for the sake of outcomes mainly. And obviously, the women that listen know exactly what I'm trying to say. Like, more often than not, you shout and scream because you want a certain outcome, but the outcome you're going for, the route you're using or the approach you're using, is not going to get you where you're going. So you're better off using grace and quote unquote being humbled, quote unquote. Do you know what I mean? Like, keep taming your emotions as much as possible to get your desired outcome. Um, so that's why I was But ultimately, what you said earlier about being left on an island where it's unknown, as a nothing, when you every action you do affects somebody else, right? So nothing you do is separate from somebody else. So when you spoke about the fact that you wanted to make sure you had answers, it's selfish. I'm not going to judge you for being selfish. It's fine. We all, in our own ways, are selfish. However, if I'm going to be on an island, regardless, which is called the unknown island, I'd rather know that I'm going there rather than you just stringing me along, because that's not fair on me. So you were looking. So I would rather be top, and I don't again want to generalize, but most people would rather hear I don't know, and I don't know when I will know. When I do know, I will let you know, and then I can leave you to work it out. But if you don't even give me that initial communication where I don't know that you don't know, then it's kind of like you're leaving me with too many options. And more often than not, people do tend to think bad before they think good. So they start to internalize and make it personal. Like, it's either that you're intentionally trying to upset me, or you're being negligent to the point of being, hurtful. And there's only so many times you can be negligent before it becomes an intention to get, like, because now you've like, it's a routine kind of thing. Or you just don't value me ultimately. So that's why I wasn't on him, because I see your side, but at the same time, it's kind of like when you put yourself in the victim seat, you realise, like, okay, well, I'm hearing a lot of I. At no point you thought about me, and it's kind of like, well, then that means you kind of subconsciously want to upset me because you didn't think about me.
And that's a fair truth. In reality, I'm not thinking about you. That's I am in reality, in its fullness of it, I'm not thinking about you first.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? In its fullness, I mean, if you were to take it from a standpoint, I mean, if I take it to its furthest root, I can say that. If I say it from a perspective of, I think a lot of us guys will think, I don't want to disappoint you. That's what we're thinking of in terms of you. We're thinking, I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want you to feel like I've let you down, and I don't want to get it wrong for you, right? Which is us thinking that we're thinking about serving you in that moment, but the reality is it's selfish, because it really is not really about you, but it's about how I'm going to feel after. I don't want to feel disappointment. I don't want to feel like I let you down. I don't want to feel like I got it wrong. So actually, the thought process will be that it's, oh, I'm thinking about you, but the reality is it's not focused on serving you. It's focused on me. It's focused on how I'm going to feel. So it's a selfish act in those moments, even though it may be shrouded and looks like it's because I didn't want to do this for you, but it's really about me. That's the reality of it. It's a selfish motive in that sense. Yeah.
What's so wrong with disappointing people? Because
Oh.
under like a lot of pressure that I have to have the answers. And I don't know, obviously, as an individual in the world, you know, we always have our conversations where I do feel a lot of pressure to maximize my time on earth and to, you know, understand the meaning of things if there is a meaning. That part I can understand. But I think when I think about the dynamic between men and women, I don't feel under pressure to have the answers. And I just wonder why you feel so under pressure to always have it figured out. Like, when, like, did I do something to make you feel like, do you know what I mean?
I think there's micro and there's macro in this situation, which is, I mean, the reality is a lot of us men, if we take the subject and bring it with a wider stance on the macro aspect, our manhood is tied into being a leader, and it's tied into having answers as a leader. Like, what leader do you know that don't have no answers? You know what I mean? So I think part of our leadership, I think we can call it a little bit toxic in that sense, but you know, as a leader, we're supposed to have some answers. You know what I mean? And especially if it was in your power to do something about it, that's also the other issue as well. So if I knew I had the skills or I had the knowledge or I had the power to change what I'm seeing in front of me, then I'm disappointed in me because I'm realizing I'm not realizing the potential. You know what I mean? I know that I can do this very thing, but I ain't done it yet. And then that's where the defensiveness can start in, because what can happen is someone else can see it differently and be like, I'll get to that. Let me work it chronologically before I get to that space. I'm going to jump and I don't want to jump. But yeah, so but yeah, no. So in that reality there, for us on a macro level, it's like we expected, or we grew up with those expectations of leadership being know your ish. And if you don't know your ish, what kind of leader are you? Or at least you can delegate very well or manage very well. There has to be some aspect of that leadership. So knowledge for me is a big thing because I'm an intellect. So knowledge is a big thing for me. If I don't know, that's where I'm like, wait, okay, you know, there's some fear behind that. If I don't know, what do I do then? You know what I mean? So I think in this particular, from a macro level, as men, we do tie a lot of our manhood to leadership and having the answers and being able to know exactly where we have to go at what particular time and what direction and what speed and etc to know those particular details. And then on a micro level, just basing it back on this particular situation, you know, it was just, you know, I wanted to make sure I had some answers for you, you know. And that disappointment, I don't like feeling disappointment. I don't like feeling like I let you down, because I genuinely do care. You know, I don't like feeling the feeling of letting you down, and also at the same time, I know again I've contributed towards it. So it's not like, oh, there's a genuine excuse of, oh, there is something else that was, you know, my roof blew off my house. There's none of that. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So, and then I start thinking about the time that I spent, and I start reviewing it, going, so where did I lose the time? And that's where the anxiousness kicks in. And in fact, probably the last few weeks, I've been feeling more of that anxiousness, because sometimes I ask myself, are you actually using your time correctly? All right. I'm like, you got so many different skills. Okay. You've kind of mastered this YouTube bit, but you're not writing the book yet. You haven't finished that yet. You haven't done a podcast you're supposed to do yet as the way you wanted to do it. You ain't, you know, done the clothing line like you said you was going to do as you needed to do it just yet. Like, are you actually using the time correctly? Yesterday I did a 5-hour hour on Black Panther, and I asked myself, did I need to be 5 hours on Black Panther? Like, is that a good use of my time? Like, is that actually what I should be doing? And so I'm constantly asking myself the question, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I time wasting? Am I procrastinating? You know what I mean? If I don't see immediate results, and that's what my brain has been on, consumed by the last few days or last few weeks, even the last few months, even, am I wasting my time? And so, yes, partly in those situations, I'm hard on myself. So then when I'm not doing what we're supposed to be doing, then I'm like, oh my God, so where did all that time go, bro? You have 24 hours in a day. You slept for 8. But where the rest of the time go? Were you wasting time? Were you sleeping? Like, I'm sitting behind my laptop 12 hours a day, and I'm thinking, what am I doing with my time then? What? You know what I mean? So then it becomes, you're spinning in your own head, you know? So I think that's where the disappointment comes from. It's like, oh my God, I had time. So how did I not do it? That means I wasn't stewarding my time very well then. Oh gosh, this is the very thing my dad said I should do better. Oh gosh, I'm still not doing it
Right.
at 30. Oh, and then you link in all that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah,
That sounds painful. And I say
yeah.
I say painful because I identify with the anxiousness that you just spoke about like, you know, how effective, productive you'll be with time. And even when I'm reading a book that I'm obviously currently studying, we have misunderstood the value of time. There's just as much value in not doing anything than there is in doing things. Like, you're better off spending your time wisely to serve you in that moment than trying to do things outside of what you want to, not want to do, but what you should be doing, if that makes sense. Like, you can allocate yourself. And I can only speak for myself, but I feel like there's a lot of women, people that can identify with the fact that I only really feel the depth of disappointment when people aren't being honest with me. So the action can be devastating, can be painful, but more often than not, I can probably handle that. It's everything you do in between what you did and when you spoke to me that really starts to tell me how I feel about the situation. And yeah, like you spoke about leadership and the fact that, you know, what leader doesn't have answers. Lots of leaders don't have answers. A lot of leaders do have objectives and strategies. So it's not that I needed to know exactly what we're doing when, but I need to know that you have an idea of where we're going and you have a plan for that. And that plan could be revised every single day, but at least I know that this is what we're working towards, or at least I know the quote unquote leader of my house, the conversation, they're going somewhere with this, you know, and I can trust you to do that. But then when you keep people outside of those conversations, the distrust starts to happen on their end, and they start to engineer things on their end, and it's just like you come where you're going. But I don't know, that felt so heavy, like to hear you say that, like that's a lot of pressure up there. And I don't know, whoever's listening, like you're human. We all know, like we are here now today, and we're born with no plan, with no direction. Like life doesn't come with a guide. So if that's the reality for each individual, outside of the fact that whether you're man or woman, then it's unfair to be in a situation where, as a man, you feel like you have to have the answers. And obviously, it's easy to say, but I feel like a lot of men need to really start to allow that reality to sink in. Like, we want you to be human. We don't want you to have all the answers. We want to hear that you don't know, but we want to know that you don't know, but you're gonna figure it out. Like, that is sexy. Okay, cool. Like, he doesn't know. He needs some time to figure it out, and the next time I speak to him, he might have something to tell me. And it's like, well, like, that's better than the last conversation we had, and that's what's admirable to me personally. And I hope, you know, people can back me up on that one.
No, that's raw. That's raw. That's definitely real on that aspect. I think two things that you said kind of stood out. I think with our situation, I think I also, you know, the same way I what my work is, which is working with a why. I also crave for people to ask why. You know, I think it changes. I think that's why our conversation was the way it was after. It's like you were trying to figure out what's actually going on. I'm not used to people doing that. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, and so I think that's what was like. Okay, great. She's actually asking me why. Whew, okay, let me explain, and then let me just get on it. Like, do you know what I mean? Let me just, you know what I mean? Because like I was sticking my head further and further into the sand. I'll be honest with you. And you know what? It did remind me of scripture again. It reminded me of the guilty man. The scripture, but it's NLT version. It's like the guilty man doesn't come before the Lord. It's like, if I feel guilty, I'm not going to come before you. You know what I mean? And so that's why I said it was godlike, because in that moment you offered me grace. So when instead of coming at me and offering a dagger, which would have been fair enough, and I would have taken it and understood it, in that moment you offered me grace by saying, what's going on? Are you okay? Like, I've been trying to reach you. Like, you know, your first indication was to see if I was okay, right? And I think that's also something that, and I think we can speak for men in this sometimes. A lot of us men haven't experienced that, where we are seen if we're okay because we produce something. So like the care for us oftentimes is in conjunction with performance. So it's less about us as human beings, and that's based on, I mean, that's partly our own fault with patriarchy. That's what happens as well. But that's also some of the upbringing that a lot of us have had, that, and people deal with it in different ways. That's what I'm saying. So that was my way. My way was to stick my head in the sand. But it's like a lot of times people don't really care about us. Like, let me give you an example of how this plays out, right? If a woman cheats and a man cheats, we don't ask the why of why the man cheated. But we will definitely ask, woman, why did you cheat? Like, we try to understand, like, be empathy, like, yo, like, there must be a reason. Niggas just cheat. That's it. Yeah, they just cheat. They just are cheating a little bit. Or if the man is bad in his behavior and the woman's bad, we often offer her grace in, oh, well, she must have had a bad upbringing. But when it comes to men, it's like, well, I don't give a hoots. He's trash. He's evil. He's this. We don't often get the explanation part of why do you do what you do? Why are you in that space right now? And I can understand why, because sometimes there's danger that comes along with our behavior. So that's also part of it as well. So, but it's like just that kind of real world example of how sometimes we're not given grace in terms of to explain yourself. Where are you coming from? What's this? And I'm not saying, by the way, ladies, that when you're in relationships with trash men, that he needs to explain everything. If they're trash, they don't mean the trash. Okay, that's not what we're saying. But you know, in reality, we what you did is what I'm saying is oftentimes what we don't actually get. We don't actually get that grace, or at least an opportunity to explain ourselves. Without there being some condemnation waiting at the end. I never felt like you're waiting to go, oh my God, so did it? Like, I never felt like you're waiting at the other end or just listening to me to wait till the end to be able to say something like, and be angry at that moment. I never felt that from you. So I didn't feel that judgment. So now I was like, okay, do you know what? I just need to peer my head out and just take it on the chin, deal with the situation, you know? So,
you definitely have to
that's it.
Though, even though you obviously carried out the act of avoidance, you came out of the other end with your hands up and say, look, I'm not going to lie. I know I haven't done this, or I know you've been trying to reach out to me. Like, you took accountability. I didn't have to tell you what you did. And that made it easy for me to be like, okay, cool. Well, if he's aware of what he did, let me hear what else comes after that conversation. And I don't know that I've had too many experiences where people hold themselves accountable themselves. I think sometimes when you find yourself in a position where something has happened and you know that both people know it's wrong and the other person is still waiting to see how much you know that they violated you, then in my intelligence, and now this conversation is I'm going to be waiting for you at the other end because you were waiting to see how much I knew when you did something and you should apologise, kind of thing.
Okay, I never thought
we both kind of gave each other grace because you could have come a bit defensive in the conversation, especially if you're saying that you were prepared to be like for the daggers to come in. You could have been a bit prideful, but you were like, do you know what? No. I think he even said like, I owe you, and then they gave me space to play on my femininity a bit, like, no, I don't want to hear it. No, and we moved on. Like,
I think it's because though, but I think there's a uniqueness in our relationship that I think maybe I wouldn't have given someone else that same energy. But now I've learned, obviously I now know, but I'm saying maybe I wouldn't have given someone else that same thing because I know that you understand how the mind works. So I know that if I explain myself, this isn't going to get lost. I think, you know what I mean? Like, I know if I explain why I was thinking the way I went thinking, Naomi can handle that. It's not going to be like, oh, that's just an excuse. She's going to be like, okay, do you know what? I hear you. And then I can go, okay, great. She's heard me. I'm heard now. You know, let Naomi go. What she wants to, whatever she needs to feel, do whatever in that moment. Fine. You know what I mean? I can take it. But I think sometimes, and maybe this men projecting, I think men projecting, I'm saying that as well sometimes, we feel like women can't handle our truth as to why we did what we did without it coming out being an absolute judgment on the other end. Like and I'm not saying that's necessarily the truth, I'm just saying, you know, we feel like sometimes we go and tell you this truth, you know, like let's say like use our situation, hey, the reality is I had other things coming up and I made them priority, that's why I didn't have time to do it. That's the reality of if you go down to the full crux of it, that is what it is, right? And in your head, we know you're going to be thinking that, right? But in my head, I'm like, no, what in my head was, I didn't want to disappoint you because sometimes we haven't got to that farthest region of actually understanding what our actions are. Like you're saying to, like I'm saying to you, like when you actually deep it, me feeling disappointed or me feeling like I'm disappointing you, letting you down, it's still selfish. It's not about you. But a lot of us as guys haven't got to that stage in the thinking. So we're just thinking at that moment, no, I didn't want to let you down. You know, I didn't want to be, but in your head, you're like, well, if you didn't want to let me down, why the heck didn't you just say something? Because it don't make no sense. So in our head, we haven't taken it all the way to the end of the conclusion a lot of times with a lot of men. So I knew that you could handle that. So when you're asking me, I'm like, well, I can just tell you the fullness of every component. I'm not going to be judged for it. So if I say I'm selfish here, I'm not going to get lambasted for saying I was selfish as to why I did what I did. If I say that, you know what, this is how I thought about it, I know I'm not going to get broken to the core, because I know that Naomi can actually understand there are different components as to why I did what I did. Whereas other people might be like, I don't care, it's one way, you fucked up, and this is what it is. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
It's hard to say.
I think the only thing that I will say is that, and this is something that I'm learning myself, is that what people can handle is not my responsibility. Like, my only responsibility, because if I allow myself to start thinking about whether or not you can handle said truth, that means that I have to, quote unquote, be relatively deceptive either to you or to myself, and I have to deal with that, and that's not good either.
That's a fair point.
I've definitely heard more than once, should I say, like, people saying, "Oh, I didn't feel like you could handle it. I don't want to hurt your feelings," and how I feel is not your responsibility. Like, you're responsible for being honest, and then what I do then. And again, even statements like that, if you study them enough, it has nothing to do with the person. It's everything to do with the fact that you don't want to be outside of the control of the outcome. So it's like we really need to unlearn these things that are being like triggered and fueled by the ego. But I get it completely. Like, it makes sense.
I think also as well, because we have some real world experiences, a lot of us, dealing with women. So as much as you're saying you can handle it, you'd be surprised how women actually handle it. It's not always that they can handle it, because what happens is an adverse emotional reaction from them. That's why I said that I knew you could handle it. When I say that, I mean in the sense of you'll be able to think through what I'm saying, because I'm not saying you weren't emotional. I'm not saying you didn't have emotions in that moment, but you will be able to think through what I'm actually saying, which means consider what I'm saying. Whereas oftentimes what we've experienced is we say it and it becomes a frenzy in that moment. Not because women are bad, but because of the way they're thinking about the situation. That's why I said that if I said I was selfish, that would have triggered a lot of people. I'm not saying that you weren't triggered, but I'm saying a lot of people would have triggered that moment and it would have gone left at that point. Once I said, oh no, it was selfish. It's like, well, see? And then we've experienced that as men. I'm not saying that's every woman, by the way. I'm saying we've experienced that. So what we're using, and it doesn't mean it's right. I'm saying, this is something that we have to learn as men. But not every experience is the same, because we actually have experienced that. If you ask any man, ask him if he's ever told the truth and if it's come back on him. Every man will tell you, yep, I told a woman the truth and she said she could handle it and it came back onto me. So I ain't telling her the truth no more.
Yeah, but you
because we've experienced it.
Who else was going to go back to?
I know, but I'm saying, look at
You're speaking. You're speaking about. Sorry, I sound like an African army. I'm like, you're speaking about.
I'm listening.
My inability to handle the truth, but it sounds like you have an inability to handle my emotional response. Like,
yeah,
it was turning in this moment. That's fine. And then when you pass that, like I said, even in that situation, when you said that you owe me, I did give you a bit of an emotional reaction. I was like, oh no, like I don't want to hear it. When we passed it, just let me have a moment. When you do something bad and you're guilty, the worst that's going to happen is somebody acknowledges it, has a bit of a tantrum about it, and you move on. Like, once you grit your teeth through the little tantrums, and you'll be fine.
But you understood it first. No, you understood it first. That's the difference. You gave me understanding first. Then you said, I'm going to have my moment now. You actually told me you're going to have a moment.
Oh.
You know what I mean? You actually told me I'm going to have my moment now. And I was like, do you know what? I get it. I'm with you. I can, because that's what I'm trying to say. Like, a lot of guys have experienced in a situation where we don't get told and we don't get warned, and it just goes, whew. And at that moment we're like, yo, so now you wanted the truth from me. I want to be understood because you're asking for the truth. I want to give you the understanding. I want to be felt like I've been understood. But if you give me an overly emotional response at that moment, now it takes away from the understanding. It's like, okay, great. Okay, I'm not going to tell anybody again because this is how it's going to turn out. And I think because men are used to dealing with other men, and so that's not how we often tell. I mean, when it does get emotional, you see what happens. People kill each other. So when we do get emotional, that's what happens. There's danger. But if you're dealing with your boy and this situation happens, you're like, all right, bro, all right, cool. All right, brother, let's move forward. And we're used to that. So when we get the emotional response, it's like, it's too much. Like, yo, you wanted to understand me. I've given you the truth to let me understand me. I'm not saying move on. I'm saying, but you got to fall more me because you now giving me this. I'm like, okay, okay. So now I'm going to tell you next time.
I feel like I said earlier in this conversation, it was easy for me to show up that way because we don't have a romantic relationship. There's no like quote unquote emotional attachment. Let's use that loosely because we obviously do have a relationship, so there is obviously an attachment. But so it was easy for me to not show up from the
Coming that way.
Yeah, but when you have feelings for somebody or you're like romantically connected to somebody, or like even if it's like a family or a friend, your feelings always speak first, even if it's not that. Because one thing I can say about myself, I feel like I reason and show up with people in a consistent manner. However, what you will notice is that the tone might be different. So I could be speaking to somebody that I'm dating and give them the same grace, but because they can hear an underline of flatness in my tone, they run with that, and then that becomes odd. But you're still being emotional, and it's like you have to allow people to be real in those moments as well. Don't run away from it. Like you're almost somebody to not be human and just hear you and then not give you anything, and that's not realistic. You can only have that expectation in like quote unquote like corporate environments or in like platonic spaces where it's like, why are you that our relationship isn't fueled or charged by emotion, so I don't expect to be dealing with this. But if you're romantically or like family members, those relationships are fueled by emotion, so you're always going to get that when you're interacting with people. It's never going to go away. But what I can say is that it's definitely something worth practicing, because it's little things in conversation that cause people to separate. So if in that moment your desires to be understood, there are little things that I can do that can either create space for you to feel understood and continue to share more, or make you shut down. And if I want you to be open, I need to be mindful of those things. So I definitely take on board what you said about the fact that the emotional reactions are a bit overwhelming. But like you said, men deal with men, women deal with women. Like if I call my friend and we fall out and she hangs up, I'm gonna call her back and be like, "You done?" Like, because we're used to that. Like we know that that's how we're kind of like wired. Yeah.
Trust me, that's if you do that to your boy, you ask, you're like, bro, what you trying to do, bro? That's a violation. No, you can't do that. But put down the phone. That's beef. That's beef. Because you're supposed to handle your emotions. You can't be acting like that. Like if you vex it, if you say you want to end the conversation, bro, right now can't handle this conversation, then man is gonna be alright, cool. But if you end the call without telling man, and you just because you're vexed, now that means you're really vexed. We are now in animosity at this moment. That's why I'm saying I think that men dealing with men is different with women than with women. I think we're so used to dealing with men, we think that's how women also, we take some of their behaviors that way.
I don't know. I think the more I look for peace in my immediate parameters, I think about how I can facilitate that. And if I know that I've done something or someone's upset and they've hung up and it's something that I deem as a disrespect, but in that moment I can tell that you're in an emotional state, I'll call you and be like, "Are you done?" And I might joke and be like, "Next time, definitely get blocked though." Like, do you get it? But it's like I'll still give you grace. I will hold you accountable and let you know that it was something that made me feel upset, but I'll let you have a moment. I think we should start letting people have moments. Obviously, have your boundaries and stuff, but moments are, you can't help it sometimes. Like, give space for people to do wrong and apologise. Don't be so quick to, like, do you know what I mean? Like, shut down. But easier said than done.
That's a fair point. Fair point. Well, listen, guys, I know you probably want us to keep on talking, and I would love to. But you know what? Time has come upon us. But no, it was a really good conversation, and I appreciate you, Naomi, as well, because like I said, I've learned some really key lessons just in that one moment, of things that I don't want to do in the future, and things I need to work on as well in terms of behavior, in terms of how I deal with situations. So I really do appreciate the mercy and the grace you showed me in that moment. And it's a lifelong lesson I've learned now as well. But anybody watching as well, if you've taken something from this, leave a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts. I know some of you do send me emails. Send me an email. You want to get in contact with me, by all means, hit me up on Instagram. If something's itching and you wanna get something off your chest. Also, you can get in contact with Naomi. If I get in contact with Naomi, yes, chase her up.
But I
Chase
wanted
her up. Where can they find you, Naomi?
You can find me on all socials at Naomi Mbelu, and that's that. And I wanted to just thank you as well for validating my growth, because I think that might be one of the first, I don't want to say first times, because I have been trying to practice it more, but the first time I've actually thought to myself, okay, how about you try this approach and see what it gets you, and clearly has got me in a good place. So it's something that I'll be, applying in my other relationships to see how it works.
That's my baby. That's my bestie.
Yeah.
Yo, top general.
Love
yes. I know. I appreciate you, Naomi. Thank you again once more. Audience, don't do anything I wouldn't do. There's not much I wouldn't do, so be careful out there. But again, this is a podcast for you guys. If you want to avoid manipulation, control, and influence in a relationship, that's negative. Okay, all right. We want to see you thrive. Okay, so if you're tired of being played, this is the relationship podcast for you. But today we were talking about self-awareness. We want to help you improve introspectiveness. You see, the first step to not getting played is knowing yourself. All right, we appreciate you guys. Stay locked and stay loaded. We'll see you again next week for another great installment of some self